Alright guys, it's time to do this thing. We are doing the end of the year top, well, it's not a top 10, it's a top 20 because it's 2020, so why not? Why not? Why not? What difference does it make? Here's 20 figures that I really like, and we're going to start it off by prefacing what I mean by really like. So this is not a list of the most technically sound, amazingly articulated, best action figures for your money type of list. This is not a list for you, this is a list for me, and me telling you what is my favorite 20 figures of the year. So it's going to be things that probably are well articulated, but maybe also not. Stuff that I just happen to really like. It's my favorite stuff, and then you get to digest that and tell me how right or likely how wrong I am. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. Number 20 is a Power Rangers item, and it is the only Power Ranger figure to appear on the list. I was going to try to do a top 10 Ranger list like I did last year, but honestly, I really couldn't do it. I couldn't find 10 figures that absolutely blew me away enough to want to go through the work of making a list. But there is one figure that I have really wanted because they finally started getting into monsters and we finally got him. So number 20 is Pumpkin Rapper. And this guy is, I mean, he's pretty much everything I wanted in this figure. He's big, he has all the pumpkin heads, he has multiple weapons, he has an energy effect. He only kind of gets edged out a bit because of the fact that he does have a few diminishing paint applications on the face. Granted, I can fix that myself, and I did, but if he had had those out of the box, he'd have been a lot higher. This guy is just one that I've really wanted. I have been dying for monsters like this in a collector-ish Power Ranger line for a very, very long time, and to get one of my top wants right out of the gate was pretty much a dream come true. He is a goofy, stupid figure, but I love everything about him. Number 19 is the only G.I. Joe figure that's going to appear on the list, and honestly, this guy could have appeared a lot higher had there not been so much turmoil around this guy, because the struggle getting him is part of the reason why he's not more of a favorite to me. It's an awesome action figure, but he still sells for $100 damn. My number 19 pick is the Target exclusive, get your groans out of the way, Cobra Trooper. And there are a lot of really solid Joe figures this year, but this guy has it all. It is literally one of the best army builders we have gotten in a very long time. He has multiple looks because of all his different accessories, tons of weapons, he has a great sculpt, he's really well articulated, and it's just a classic Cobra army builder, and frankly something that we should have had in the mainline release. Again, the only true negatives that I have to say about this figure are regarding its release. The figure on its own is pretty stellar, and I love everything about it. I made it a priority to get at least 2 of them, and that took nearly an act of Congress just to finally find a way to get them. But they are exceptional figures, assuming you don't have to pay the crazy price point. Number 18 takes us to Figuarts and Dragon Ball territory with the start of one of, if not my favorite group of characters when it comes to goofy Dragon Ball stuff, the Ginyu Force. Number 18 is Captain Ginyu. This guy is, I mean, it's pretty much everything I wanted him to be. He's big, he's really well articulated, he can hit those stupid weird poses, he comes with a nice big Dragon Ball, he's got some great expressions, he's pretty much a perfect representation of Captain Ginyu in plastic, and it's something that we have, and myself in particular, have been waiting for a very, very long time, and now Bandai is just, you know, slapping us in the face with all of these Ginyu Force members one after another. But the big guy himself is definitely at the top of my list. I'm so glad that we were finally able to knock him off the list as well as get the entire team started. Number 17 is a DC figure, which honestly, it still seems crazy that I'm going to put one of these on the list because I have a very up and down relationship with McFarlane's stuff these days. I think most of it is pretty objectively awful, but there are a few standout figures, and one of them in particular is Asriel. This guy is, I mean, it's honestly, as far as I'm concerned, the best figure McFarlane has made in this line so far. The look is down perfectly for this version of Asriel. I would still love him to tackle a more classic version, but this version is incredibly well done. The different textures, the different colors, all the different finishes, the way they did that striated cape on the back is really well done. It's almost ingenious how they decided to do that without making him super rigid, and he comes with a flaming sword. What more can you ask for? This is a stellar interpretation of this figure in plastic, something that I didn't think we were going to get this soon from McFarlane, but something that was definitely on my wants list for the very small amount of DC stuff that I truly have much of an interest in. Number 16 takes us to NECA Toys and a Predator figure, and the only Predator that's going to appear on the list because it's kind of an up and down year for Predator stuff this year. But number 16 is the Alpha Predator. This is, I mean, honestly, objectively speaking, it's probably the best Predator NECA has ever made. They pulled out all the stops, and for good reason. It was the 100th, quote-unquote, 100th Predator. It has a unique design, but it also pays homage to that original Predator suit design, which I think is just really cool on its own. So you get that extra mask. He has all of those primitive bone style weapons, but he's also a much larger than average Predator, and he just looks fantastic. There's a ton of crazy sculpt on there, all the paint applications, he moves really well, and then on top of that you got all that bonus stuff for the Predator game. If you care about that, it's a nice little pack-in on its own, as well as all of the little file cards that he came with as well. So it's kind of a complete package that kind of topped off a really, really cool Predator, and one that honestly I'd been looking forward to for a very, very long time. Number 15 takes us to the first of a handful of Super 7 figures on the list with a reissue of sorts for a figure that you may or may not have. I have this figure already, so this wasn't as important of a release, but it's still my favorite thing. And if he hadn't been a reissue, Liono would have probably been my number one, just because, you know, I'm that crazy about Thundercats. But this figure is everything that I expected him to be. He is a redo of the Mattel figure with a bunch of changes as far as a few increased paint applications. You've got that extra head sculpt, which I have come to use pretty much 100% on this figure because I really do like that kind of fighting action style head sculpt that they gave him, along with all the extra claw shields to give him finally a more cartoon accurate claw shield. And it's just Thundercats. It's my thing. I've always loved Thundercats. I've wanted this for years and years and years to finally pick back up. Super 7 is finally here doing it, and Liono is Liono. So he probably would have been much, much higher on my list had he been a truly 100% new figure, but it's still Thundercats, and he was always going to appear on my list somewhere. Number 14 takes us back to Figuarts and back to Dragon Ball with I guess the largest thing still in Figuarts, right? So Great Ape Vegeta. This thing is, I mean, it's just something to see, really. It's a crazy figure on its own. It's something that I never, ever expected we would truly get in Figuarts because, well, it's an incredibly expensive piece. It's like a $180 figure. It's massive. It's heavy. It's just entirely different from everything else we've ever gotten in the line. But at the same time, it's kind of like a pipe dream. It's one of those things that, yeah, it would be cool if they could do it, and they finally did it, and it's a really solid piece. It looks really good. It moves really well for how big it is. It comes with a good smattering of accessories, and it's just one of those things that it's so cool that you have to throw it on the list because I love Dragon Ball stuff, I love Figuarts, and this thing is pretty much everything I wanted it to be in just an incredibly large and hulking package. Number 13 goes back to Super 7 and Turtles this time around with Leonardo. This guy is, I mean, come on, he's my favorite turtle, and it moves really well. It looks fantastic. It's an homage to the vintage Playmates toy, which on any given day is among my favorites, if not my favorite vintage toy line, because it was everything to me as a kid, and these figures are, I say it a lot, they are the modern interpretation of what I thought I was playing with as a kid. It really tugs on the nostalgia strings, and this figure is everything I wanted him to be. This line in particular is everything I want it to be, and this guy just fires on all cylinders for me. He moves well, he looks great, and just like all the other figures in this line, he comes with a tremendous array of accessories to do so much with. You get the extra head sculpt, you get all those vintage weapons, you get the sprue rack. It's a complete package, not even taking into consideration the actual packaging. It's all really well done, and I love everything about this guy. Number 12 goes back to Figuarts, and I think this is the last one on the list, and this is the only figure on the list that I never got around to reviewing because I don't know why. For such a pretty high-profile figure, I just never got around to it. So number 12 is the Beskar Mandalorian from SH Figuarts. Save for maybe the little neck peg issue where it kind of sits too low, I do think this is a really, really solid figure. I love the aesthetics of him. I think the soft goods are pretty decent for the figure. He has a ton, and I can't stress enough, a ton of accessories. Flamethrower, he's got the whistlers, he's got the jetpack, he's got an energy effect for the gun, he's got a million hands, the whole deal, really. There is so much stuff in this release, and it's my preferred version for the character. I think it's better than the Black Series, and I think it is the preferred look as well. I'm sure most people do when it comes to the overall suit design for Mando, but it's a really solid release, and I'm very, very happy with pretty much everything they did when it comes to the little Mandalorian subline for Figuarts, but Mando himself was a big standout to me. Number 11 takes us back to Turtles, but to NECA, with one of my favorite movie characters of all time. Even though he's in the movie for I don't know, what, 2 minutes or something. He was always the thing for me when it came to Secret of the Ooze, and of course I'm talking about Super Shredder. He's just big and hulking and an impressive action figure. For something so big, he moves incredibly well. He has a good deal of accessories for something that doesn't really need a whole lot, really, because he does almost nothing in the movie. The aesthetics are down perfectly, even to the weird shading on the suit. It is accurate to the movie. The cape is really well done, and a lot of it for me is just the fact that this takes me back to my childhood. This is a figure that I have wanted for a very long time, because we never got a movie Super Shredder. We got a Super Shredder in the vintage line, but he was never like this, really. He was always not exactly movie accurate. So I'm really happy that we finally got something like this, and honestly, NECA just knocked it out of the park. It was one of the best Turtle releases of the year. Number 10 is one that almost slipped through the cracks, because when I go back to think about this line, nothing really happened at all this year, except for at the very beginning when a few figures trickled out and then the world collapsed and things just got pushed back. But Mythic Legions has not been on the forefront for me for a very, very long time. We got a few figures at the beginning of the year, and then we got PowerCon exclusives in August, and that was it, because it's just been pre-order after pre-order that keeps getting pushed back. But this figure really stood out to me because it's a Motu tribute, and I'm a sucker for those. So Lord Dragool is number 10, and I just love everything about this figure. I love the vampiric design in general when it comes to this line. I love the color scheme for his armor. I love the head that they gave him. I love the helmeted head. I like the cape, even though I don't tend to use it these days. But really, my favorite aspect of this figure is what they did to bring in the Hordak and Imp aspect with the axe. Putting that skull and painting it like Imp on the axe is such a cool little callback to Motu, something that the Horsemen are really good at doing. And this figure is just fantastic. He's got a unique color scheme, and it's a solid Legions release in a year that was very, very dry when it comes to this line. Speaking of Motu, number 9 is an actual Motu figure, because if you can believe it, Masters of the Universe figures came out this year, and I am not talking about Masters Origins. That's a really cool line, but they're not going to appear on this list. Number 9 is the William Stout collection. Yes, they did come out this year. I had to double check. Godskeletor figure. So I've said it a number of times. I absolutely, unequivocally, and unironically love the Motu movie. I really don't know why. I watched the hell out of it as a kid, so it's just something that's always stuck with me. Frank Langella and Dolph Lundgren are Skeletor and He-Man for me, so these very much worked and were right up my alley. This version of Skeletor, though, is something that I have wanted for a super long time, longer than I can recall. It's one of those things that was almost never possible because of all the legal and political nonsense surrounding the Motu movie and Mattel. These figures were unattainable, and yet Super 7 did the impossible and made these figures a reality. And this is one that was just at the top of my list. When I got him out of the box on the first day, I just sort of stared at it because I was in disbelief that we actually had them, and they did such a bang-up job on this one. Number 8 takes us to a line and a manufacturer that I rarely, if ever, talk about. I think I've done 2 reviews for this company total, I think, because I just don't find the time for them. But I did manage, for better or worse, to finally take the jump into Mezco 112 stuff this year. And number 8 goes to Baron Benz. There were a lot of really cool figures this year, from Nosferatu to all the Gomez stuff, but this guy's the one that I really keep coming back to. And it's just the look and the vibe and the overall kind of Kirby aesthetics that he has, with the kind of interstellar, intergalactic diver motif. He's got the wild head sculpts, he's got that anchor, the staff, the whole deal, the whole backstory. I love the soft goods on this guy. This is my preferred style of soft goods. Nothing that's truly skin tight, but something that is a little bit more loose fitting, like an actual jumpsuit. And the color palette on this figure absolutely does it for me. I don't know exactly how popular Baron Benz truly is within the whole Rumble Society thing, but for me, it is one of my favorite figures. When I want to mess around with a 112 figure, I usually end up gravitating towards this blue, intergalactic, water guy, whatever he truly is. I love messing around with this figure. Number 7 goes back to Super 7. I did not mean to do that, but with what was my favorite figure of their Turtles Ultimates line for a while, until we got Wave 2. So number 7 goes to the Foot Soldier, what I called the sleeper hit for Wave 1, because it's just a perfect recreation of that vintage figure. He can hit that stupid squat pose, he comes with all those crazy and weird accessories, and he just looks perfect. I mean, really, there is nothing for me to complain about when it comes to this figure. He looks exactly like I think a vintage Playmates figure would be, just modernized a bit. Not in the hunched over position, stood upright, actually looking like some sort of humanoid creature. And it's just a fantastic action figure, to the point that I had to buy 5 of them because I really wanted to army build this thing, because I've said it a number of times, I have a weird attachment to this guy or to this type of figure. But I think Super 7 and the Horsemen absolutely nailed it. It's one of my favorite Turtle releases of the year by a long shot. Number 6 goes back to Hasbro and to Star Wars. So I was really kind of hemming and hawing over how many Star Wars releases were, if any, were going to appear on this list. And I had to give it to my favorite Black Series release, because it's far and away my favorite Star Wars release of the year, just because we finally got them. But number 6 goes to the new Stormtrooper. And you could sort of, extrapolate that to be like the new clones and the Incinerator Trooper and stuff like that. But really, when I boil it down, it's all about the new Stormtrooper. I still don't know exactly how many of them I have, because I have so many that are open, and I have a bunch that are just scattered everywhere that are not open yet, because I just haven't gotten to them all. But I truly have army builded the hell out of this thing, to the point where I have way too many of them. I love this new design. It's something that I've wanted them to go back and revisit for a number of years now, because that original figure is honestly kind of a mess. He's weirdly articulated in a few places, and it's just not that accurate, whereas this figure is a good interpretation of a Stormtrooper that's really well articulated with some of the new modern points of articulation that they've been working with, and he just looks great. It's a nice army builder. He's been relatively easy to get a hold of, and again, it's just something that I've really wanted to see redone for a long time. Number 5 goes to Hasbro again, and we're switching gears to Marvel Legends. And if you've seen my Marvel Legends top 10, you kind of know what this is going to be. So number 5 on my overall list goes to the Retro Spider-Man, because it's, again, something that I've wanted for a very long time from Hasbro. A new articulation scheme for Spider-Man. I am over the Sunfire body for Spider-Man. I am over the Pizza Spider-Man body. I want more Spider-Man figures that can utilize this body, that for the size that makes sense for them anyway. Not all figures, not all versions of Spider-Man will work on this body, but I think that they've got a great articulation scheme with this one. It's very Power Rangers Lightning Collection-esque with the diaphragm cut and the ab crunch, and it works so well. He can hit those crouches. He's super agile, and it just looks really good. I dig the body scheme. I like the musculature on him. Size is really good for specific kinds of Spider-Man figures. And again, it's just something that I really wanted them to get to. I would love for them to give me reasons to buy more Spider-Man figures that utilize this body. Number 4 is yet again a Turtles figure that is not a turtle. Number 4 goes to Super 7's Bebop, my favorite Super 7 turtle of the year, because just like I said in the Turtles video, he is so impressive once you get him in hand. He's humongous. He is a very heavy, beefy figure, and that does a lot for me when it comes to characters like this. This guy has a tremendous shelf presence that no other version of Bebop has. It really shows that this character, this guy, can be a huge, hulking bruiser that can take on the Turtles alone and really showcase how big and powerful he is amongst some relatively small Turtle figures. I think Super 7 went the right way when it comes to making him really big, making him this kind of larger-than-life kind of character, because he is enormous. He's a very, very large figure with some solid accessories, great sculpt, really takes advantage of all the weirdness on that original Playmates figure, and he moves really well. Even though he doesn't have a crunch of any kind, you can still get him into some really solid poses without much muss or fuss, and I just think he looks perfect. Number 3 is a figure that has been kind of in a dangerous position for a little while, because I have been touting it as my number 1 for months and months and months before ever really sitting down and just sort of thinking about, well, is it truly my number 1, or am I just super, super happy with it? And I don't know, it probably could have been my number 1 had there not been a couple other figures that came out this year. It's deserving of a really top spot, though. And number 3 is the Sentinel Toys Ronin Warriors Ryo of the Wildfire. This guy is, I mean, it's the start of a line that I have been just dying to get into for quite a while, ever since they initially showed that first prototype. It's an incredible release. It's one of my favorite anime series, so it's got some legs on it right there. But it's a tremendous release just because of how it's implemented. He's got that actual figure that you attach the armor to. You can have that blank body with the armor on if you want to have an unarmored figure. And there's just so much in the box. I mean, there is almost too many accessories for this thing. It's kind of imposing to actually get into wanting to mess around with this one, because you can really do so much with it. But it moves incredibly well. The sculpt is damn near perfect. It's got magnetized parts to keep some of the armor on. And again, it's just something that I have truly wanted for a very, very long time, something that is very nostalgic for me. and that really does it in many cases when it comes to toys, but they absolutely killed it with this one, and yeah, it would have been my number one had there not been a couple other things this year for sure. Number 2 is the only 2-pack on the list, and it is the last Turtles item on the list. Number 2 goes to NECA Toys, Toka, and Razar. These guys are, I mean, what can I say here that I didn't already say in the Turtles video? They are basically perfect. They're big, they're beefy, they're well articulated, but it all comes down to the looks. They are damn near perfect plastic representations of the suits used in the movie, and you really can't get much better than that. They look fantastic. They have, well, Toka has anyway, articulated eyebrows. Who thought of that? They need a raise because it's one of the coolest things I've seen on a figure in a very long time. They come with a crazy array of accessories, and for a NECA Turtles release, they were, if you were there in time on the right set of days, easy to get with that pre-order, which I am incredibly thankful for because I would have been kicking myself had I not been able to get these. They are so good and probably at this point the best entries in the Turtles movie line, which says a lot because it's a line full of amazing figures. So here we are at the number 1 spot, and this is a figure that it might be a surprise to some folks, but maybe not, just because of the stuff that I like. And again, this is a list of things that I like. This is not the most articulated figure. This is not the figure with the most array of accessories, but this is a figure that means a lot to me. And this is kind of how I did the list last year too. Last year's list, my top figure was something that was kind of out of left field. It was a Gundam figure, but it meant a lot to me. It was a really awesome figure, but it meant a lot to me. This is a Masters of the Universe figure that means a lot to me. And no, I'm not talking about Snake Mountain. That's its own thing. Snake Mountain is one of the coolest things we've gotten in a long time, but this is an action figure. My top action figure of the year is the William Stout Collection Dolph Lundgren movie He-Man. I'm going to say it right now. This is one of my favorite action figures, period, at the moment. I love this figure so much, and it's all nostalgia for me. It's the fact that we finally got this guy, the fact that it is a movie-styled He-Man, and it's as close to a Dolph Lundgren He-Man action figure that I'm ever going to get, most likely. I love this movie. I love Dolph Lundgren as He-Man. No matter how good or bad you may think that movie is, it does something for me every time I watch it. Opening this figure was a huge deal for me. As ridiculous as that sounds, it was a huge deal for me, and I love having this guy around. It rarely leaves my review space. It rarely leaves my desk. It's one of those that I have constantly had around for an entire year, and it's just always been there. It's one of my favorite figures in all of Motu Classics, and I love it. It maybe not be the most conventional of top picks, but it's a stellar action figure for someone like me who bases a lot of their favoritism on nostalgia and how it makes them feel and how much it takes me back to being a kid. So that is my top 20 list for the year. Of course, if I didn't include, say, Snake Mountain, we gave it a little quick mention because it's not a figure. It would have been number 1 because it's a mountain and it's cool. But this is my top 20 list of figures that I have really enjoyed this year, that were my favorites. So let me know what you guys think about this list. Let me know how right or wrong I am in my opinions here. Please don't hold back. And I will catch you, well, maybe not next time, but next year.